Hello, and welcome to Session 6 of Getting Started with Action Research. As we discussed in earlier sessions, reviewing the published academic literature, developing an annotated bibliography, and identifying an intervention is fundamental to getting started with the action research process. In this short video, we will introduce the basics of designing a data collection plan. Researchers spend years becoming experts in data collection. But even with a little training, you can become better at collecting data that is meaningful and reliable for your action research. To get started, let's review some basic data terms. Let's begin with quantitative and qualitative. Quantitative refers to data that expresses a certain amount, typically using numbers. Quantitative or numeric data can be further broken down into two types, discrete and continuous. Discrete data uses units of measurement that cannot be split up. For example, the number of times a student displays a certain behavior in a class period. Continuous data represents measurements that are described using intervals on a real number line where all the points between the numbers have meaning. For example, the time it takes for a student to complete a task. Qualitative data refers to descriptive accounts that characterize but do not measure the attributes, characteristics, or properties of an existing situation or experience. For example, a piece of reflective writing that describes a student's reaction to a new type of activity. Two more key data terms are validity and reliability. Validity is the extent to which an assessment measures what it claims to measure. For example, to what extent does a lab practical performance task assess the mastery of a specific lab skill? Reliability is the degree to which the result of an assessment can be perceived as accurate. For example, a thermometer is reliable because it gives you a correct measure of temperature each time it's used. The level of consistency is much more difficult to achieve with academic assessments. The last term we will consider is triangulation. Triangulation refers to the use of two or more data sources that provide information about the same condition or question. For example, collecting classroom observation data about the extent to which students enjoy an activity, as well as using a student exit survey asking them to rate their enjoyment. Now let's look at the three distinct stages of an action research project that must be addressed in the data collection plan. There is the pre-intervention stage, the period before you introduce and implement the intervention. There is the intervention stage, the period during which you are actively using the intervention. And there is the post-intervention stage, the period immediately following the intervention. Each stage involves different forms of data collection. Baseline data collection occurs in the pre-intervention stage. Baseline data helps you understand the extent of the problem or need and clarifies the existing situation, including students' prior knowledge, understanding, skills, and dispositions. Formative data collection occurs throughout the intervention stage. Formative data helps you understand the extent to which your intervention is making a difference or the situation is changing. Summative data collection occurs in the post-intervention stage. Summative data is collected at the end of an intervention period. Summative data is typically used to describe the causal relationship between the intervention and the student learning outcome. You cannot establish causal relationships without robust baseline data. There are three reasons for collecting data at each of these stages. To understand multiple perspectives before, during, and after the intervention. To assess learning outcomes, knowledge, understanding, skills, and dispositions before, during, and after the intervention. And to document outputs. For example, what you did, who participated, how often they participated, and what the participants did. There are distinctive data methods for collecting each type of data. To understand multiple perspectives, action researchers may use interviews, questionnaires, surveys, or reflective journals. Surveys and interviews are the most common data sources for building an action researcher's understanding of participants' experiences of, or feelings, opinions, or attitudes toward a teaching strategy or activity. Surveys often combine scaled response questions that yield quantitative data and open response questions that yield qualitative data. Interviews may be conducted with individuals or groups. They may use a structured set of preset questions. They may be unstructured and rely on broad open-ended questions, or they may be semi-structured, combining preset questions and the opportunity to go off script. To assess learning outcomes, action researchers rely on a range of commonly used classroom assessments as well as observations of learning. Observing learning can be quite challenging because you can observe student performance, but you must infer learning from performance and knowledge of individual learners. Observations are what you can see. They are not inferences or statements of what you think is happening or interpretations of what you see. Careful observations become data when they are recorded and evaluated. Observations can also be organized or coded and counted to create quantitative data. To document outputs, action researchers may combine routine record keeping, for example, student attendance, with the collection of key artifacts developed by the researcher to deliver the intervention or produced by the participants in response to the intervention. As you develop your data collection plan, it is important to discuss your proposed data collection methods with colleagues, especially the validity and reliability of your chosen methods, and the extent to which your data triangulation will provide a robust description of the learner outcomes. In the next session, we'll talk about planning and timelining your action research project, and how you will involve others, including your students and colleagues, in the action research process. Thank you for your interest in action research.